To Star Trek fans, Jonathan Frakes will always be the cool guy with the beard, Commander Riker. But the real man has a story that's just as exciting as any space adventure. Frakes didn't have an easy path to becoming famous, and what happened after was full of surprises too. From weird job changes and problems behind the camera to thinking about his life and starting something totally new and different. His real story might be even cooler than the one we saw on TV. So, what really happened to Jonathan Frakes? Jonathan Frakes, who most people know as the confident and charming Commander William Riker from Star Trek: The Next Generation, was born on August 19th, 1952. But his story is way bigger than just being on a spaceship show. He was a kid. Frakes liked acting in school plays, but he thought it was just for fun. That changed one summer when he got a job helping people find their seats at a theater called Festival of America Theater. One day, a director saw something special in him and asked him to be in a show. That one invitation changed his whole life. Frakes quit studying psychology and jumped into theater with both feet. After getting his theater degree from Penn State, Frakes went to Harvard to learn even more about acting. With his master's degree finished, he went straight to New York City to try to become famous. But becoming a star wasn't easy or straightforward. In a really weird twist, Frakes got a job with Marvel Comics, where he traveled around the country dressed up as Captain America. It was strange, for sure, but it helped him pay his bills and gave him another funny story to tell before he became famous. After a while, the stage called him back. He got a part in a Broadway musical called Shenandoah. It helped him get on TV. Soap operas, like The Doctors, gave him his first time on screen, and then he got small parts on shows like The Waltons, Fantasy Island, and Quincy. He was slowly building up his name as an actor. In the early 1980s, life changed again when Frakes met actress Deborah Lee Scott at an exercise class in LA. They liked each other right away and got married soon after. They bought a nice house in Sherman Oaks, but the marriage didn't last and they got divorced. But that wasn't the end of Frakes' love story. In 1982, he met Jeannie Francis when they were filming a show called Bare Essence. There wasn't much of a spark the first time they met, but when they met again while filming a Civil War show called North and South in 1985, everything changed. Francis remembered later how the old-fashioned costumes made everything feel magical. Everyone looked amazing, and something just clicked. Frakes was sure she was the one, but she wasn't so sure at first. When he asked her to marry him, she actually said no. Francis had spent her young years on General Hospital and missed out on a lot of normal life experiences. She wanted to take things slow, so they did. Their big romantic date was just talking at a McDonald's in a church parking lot, but it worked. They built a strong relationship, and years later, they're still together and happy. Then came 1987, and with it, Star Trek: The Next Generation. Frakes got the job playing Commander Riker, but not without some drama. First, originally, another actor named Billy Campbell was supposed to play the part. According to producer Rick Berman, the big bosses at Paramount didn't think Campbell could be a good commander, so they replaced him with Frakes. It turned out to be a perfect choice, but the early days of the show weren't smooth at all. Season 1 is known as the worst season, and one episode called Code of Honor has become famous for being really bad. It was set on a planet that was supposed to be like ancient China, but the episode only had black actors dressed in stereotypical tribal clothes. It was tone deaf and had racist problems. Frakes has never held back his feelings about it at conventions, and in interviews, he's called it everything from embarrassing to racist garbage. He even said that if the episode stays on streaming services, it should have a warning that makes it clear this doesn't represent what Star Trek really stands for. Luckily, the show got much better over time, and fans started noticing something. Funny, the better the episodes got, the longer Frakes' beard grew. In Season 1, He was clean-shaven, but by season 2, he had a full beard. It became a running joke with fans and even got a name, growing the beard to mark when a show gets really good. It's the opposite of jumping the shark, which is when a show gets bad. The funny thing is, the beard only happened because of a writer's strike in 1988. Frakes didn't have to shave, so he didn't. Creator Gene Roddenberry liked it, thought it looked like a ship captain, and kept it. Even Frakes' wife was a fan, which sealed the deal. He said many times how proud he is that Riker's beard is now part of pop culture, and even shows up in the dictionary online. At its best, Star Trek: The Next Generation wasn't just a hit, it was the sci-fi show of its time, shooting the franchise into a whole new level. While the original Star Trek series built up fans after it went into reruns, TNG was a huge global hit, pretty much right from the start. The late 80s and early 90s were a time of big changes. The Berlin Wall came down, the Cold War ended, and the world was figuring out what was normal now. TNG stood out because it tackled big questions about people, progress, and what's right and wrong in ways that no other show on TV was doing. It didn't just entertain, it made people think. While the show looked similar to the original series, which made life easier for editors dealing with 26 episodes per season, the storytelling and characters were always the most important part. But one person who dared to shake up that classic TV style was Jonathan Frakes. He didn't just sit in the captain's chair. He started looking at the director's chair too, while appearing in every single episode of The Next Generation, one of only 2 actors to do so, along with Patrick Stewart. Frakes was quietly watching everything that happened behind the scenes. He sat in on casting meetings, editing rooms, and production meetings, treating it all like a crash course in TV directing. By the time he directed his first episode in season 3, The Offspring, he'd already been part of the show for over 50 episodes. He wasn't just a guy trying something new. He knew how the show worked inside and out. When he got to direct again in season 4's The Drumhead, began to put his own style into things. This episode wasn't just another day on the bridge, it had serious weight. Frakes was directing Gene Simmons, Hollywood legend with Oscar nominations and an Emmy. She played a retired Starfleet prosecutor in what became one of TNG's most powerful courtroom-style dramas. It felt like a big-time legal drama, and Frakes knew he couldn't direct it like just another episode of the show. He wanted to make it feel different, more emotional, more like a movie. Showrunner Rick Borman was known for keeping things traditional, with very few camera tricks or fancy shots, but Frakes, knowing the rules, decided to bend them a bit. Instead of sticking to standard cuts and setups, he moved the camera more, connecting characters, reactions, and drawing the audience deeper into the emotion of the scene. It was subtle, but it worked. Though The Drumhead might not be every fan's favorite episode, it's definitely one of the series' most powerful. Now, here's where the story takes a twist. Despite being successful, TNG ended after 7 seasons. Not because ratings were bad, they weren't. In fact, the show was still really popular. The cast wanted to do more. Jonathan Frakes himself was especially hopeful for an 8th season, but the studio had other plans. Paramount decided the future of the franchise was in movies, not in another TV season. Even now, Frakes has admitted that nobody really gave the cast a good reason why. It wasn't about the fans, and it wasn't about the show losing steam. It all came down to money. Selling syndication rights was getting harder. The cast salaries were going up, and special effects weren't getting any cheaper. Behind the scenes, Paramount had already decided to move toward Star Trek, Voyager, and that decision had been locked in years before the final TNG season even aired. Still, that 7-season structure became the standard. Voyager and Deep Space Nine followed the same plan. But The Next Generation stood out, not just because of its stories or visuals, but because It kept getting better. It took a season or two to really click, but once it did, the series didn't just match the original in some ways, it was even better. While Jonathan Frakes became a beloved face of the franchise, he's never been afraid to speak his mind. Over the years, he shared that he sometimes wished TNG gave him a bit more to work with as an actor. He admired the relationship between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in the original series. Their witty banter, their constant back and forth, the playful tension. That kind of dialogue, he missed it on TNG. Frakes once pointed out that while Picard, Riker, and Data had their rhythm, it just didn't have that same spark. That's not to say he wasn't proud. Far from it. He loved the show, the stories, and the growth it sparked in his career. But he wasn't shy about admitting where things could have been better. That honesty is part of what makes him such a favorite, not just as Riker, but as a guy who truly cares about the legacy of the show. After Star Trek, The Next Generation wrapped up in 1994, Frakes didn't just hang up his Starfleet uniform. He jumped right back into action with the Next Generation movies. Not only did he return as Commander Riker, but he also stepped behind the camera to direct two of the films, First Contact and Insurrection. Now, Insurrection felt less like a blockbuster and more like a polished, feature-length episode of the TV series, and that was kind of the point. Frakes leaned into the classic Star Trek formula, a compelling moral dilemma at the heart of the story. After all the intense time travel action in First Contact, this film slowed things down and focused on a quieter, more thoughtful tale. It centered on the BAKU, a small village living in the Briar Patch, basically a spa zone in space, where the locals don't age thanks to metaphasic particles in the environment. The conflict. Starfleet, led by Admiral Doherty, teamed up with the Sona enemies of the Baku to forcibly relocate the villagers and extract the planet's healing properties. Captain Picard wasn't having it. He flat out disobeyed orders to protect the Baku, standing firm on the Federation's principles. Frakes later explained that this storyline sparked deep, heated conversations behind the scenes about the ethics of sacrificing a few for the benefit of the many. It brought up real-world comparisons, places like Bosnia or Zimbabwe where similar moral compromises had taken place. Frakes called it out for being unethical, immoral, even racist, and he loved that Insurrection took the time to explore those questions. Sure, the film didn't explode at the box office like some hoped, but for die-hard fans, it delivered that signature Star Trek blend of science fiction and social commentary. Then came 2002's Star Trek Nemesis, and that's where things got rocky. This was supposed to be the big send-off for the Next Generation crew. Instead, it turned into a story that sidelined the main cast and focused a little too heavily on its villain. Shinzin, played by a then-unknown Tom Hardy. Shinzin was a younger clone of Captain Picard who took control of the Romulan Empire, and the plot revolved around his obsession with his original DNA source. In his memoir, Making It So, Patrick Stewart described how Hardy kept to himself on set, with the cast preferring to stay in his trailer with his girlfriend. This lack of connection made it tough to build chemistry, especially with a storyline that relied so heavily on the dynamic between Shinzin and Picard. Meanwhile, Frakes, who had directed two previous TNG films, wasn't asked to direct Nemesis, a decision he believed had more to do with his agents thinking he should step away from Star Trek for a while. Looking back, he regretted that choice. He admitted later that he would have loved to direct the movie and might have done things very differently. Frakes also said that the biggest problem with Nemesis was how little attention it gave the core characters fans had spent years getting to know and love. The movie opened with Riker and Troy's wedding, a moment that should have been huge, but Frakes said that entire scene got chopped to pieces in editing. What was originally a heartfelt celebration, packed with cameos and even a performance by Brent Spiner, turned into a blink and doom sit moment. He'd offered his help to director Stuart Baird, even telling him that the cast was a tight-knit team, ready to do whatever it took to make the film great. But Baird didn't take him up on the offer. Frakes called it arrogance. Others, like Marina Sirtis, who played Troy, were less diplomatic. She flat out called Baird an idiot. While that might have been harsh, the reality was that Baird, a solid action director with credits like Executive Decision and U.S. Marshals, just wasn't the right fit for the Star Trek universe. He didn't know the lore, didn't connect with the cast, and fans noticed. The result? Nemesis flopped hard. It pulled in just around $67 million worldwide on a $60 million budget, making it the first Star Trek film to tank at the box office. Even today, it's still widely seen as one of the weakest entries in the franchise. Then came May 13th, 2005. Star Trek Enterprise aired its final episode. And let's just say it didn't go out with the applause its creators were hoping for. A series which followed the early adventures of humanity's first starship explorers on the Enterprise NX-01 had already been struggling to win over fans and critics alike. But when it came time to wrap things up, the finale sparked a wave of frustration that's still talked about in Trek circles today. Instead of giving the crew of Enterprise a send-off that celebrated their own unique story, the episode shifted, focused to familiar faces from the next generation, Commander Riker and Counselor Troy. The finale was framed as a holodeck simulation set during the TNG era, revisiting a long-past mission from the perspective of characters who weren't even part of Enterprise's timeline. While it was intended as a nostalgic tribute to Star Trek's broader legacy, it left many viewers and the cast of Enterprise feeling like their story had been hijacked. Scott Bakula, who played Captain Jonathan Archer, was one of the most visibly upset. According to sources, co-creator Brannon Braga said Bakula was normally gracious and easygoing, but the finale struck a nerve. He didn't hold back in expressing how wrong it felt that Enterprise's last chapter had turned into a TNG cameo fest. And honestly, he wasn't alone. Many fans echoed that exact sentiment. Even Jonathan Frakes, who returned as Riker for the finale, later admitted it was a misstep. He felt uncomfortable being part of a send-off that didn't belong to him or his castmates. As he reflected in interviews, he totally understood Bakula's quiet frustration. From Frakes' perspective, it seemed like Enterprise had been shortchanged. Most Star Trek series got to complete a full 7-season arc. Enterprise only got 4. So, ending the show with characters from another, more successful series stepping in felt tone-deaf, like rubbing salt in the wound. Frakes said he only agreed to reprise his role because he was told the fans wanted it. But once the episode aired, it became clear that wasn't entirely true. Fan reactions online were mixed at best. On Reddit, longtime viewers felt betrayed. One fan pointed out how the finale made Enterprise feel like a footnote in the next generation, reducing its story to a background setting in someone else's tale. Another user said the concept might have had potential, but ended up disrespecting the characters and fans who stuck with the show through all 4 seasons. Still, not every reaction was negative. A few viewers appreciated the attempt to do something bold and different. One fan gave the creators credit for trying to weave Enterprise into the larger Star Trek legacy, even if the execution didn't land. In hindsight, Brannon Braga himself admitted the finale was a misfire. He said their hearts were in the right place. They wanted to create a heartfelt farewell and tie it into the greater Starfleet saga. But in doing so, they lost sight of what made Enterprise special on its own. Even Braga now believes they should have simply focused on telling a great story for Archer and his crew, and let Enterprise end with the dignity it deserved. In 2024, Jonathan Frakes took on an exciting new challenge that might pull him away from the Star Trek universe, at least for a while. This time, he signed on to direct Deathlands, a gritty, post-apocalyptic sci-fi series based on the long-running novels and audiobooks by James Axler. It's a 10-part series being produced by Next Cipher, an independent company founded by crypto pioneer Jeff Garzik. And in a cool twist of fate, the showrunner is none other than Mark A. Altman, a well-known Star Trek historian and co-author of the 50-year mission. The production was set to take place in Bulgaria starting in spring 2024. That's a major time commitment. And while it's not confirmed if Frakes is directing the entire series, the project is big enough to keep him busy for a while. It's a very different kind of sci-fi from what fans are used to seeing him involved with, grimmer, darker, and more survival-focused. But knowing Frakes and his long history with world-building and character-driven storytelling, he's likely to bring a strong vision to DEA, THL, ANDS, since his days on The Next Generation, the Star Trek franchise. One of his most recent Star Trek efforts was on Star Trek Discovery, where he directed multiple episodes over several seasons. In fact, he stayed with the show from its earliest days all the way through to its 5th and final season. One of his standout episodes was Season 5, Episode 9, titled Lagrange Point. In it, Captain Michael Burnham leads a high-stakes mission onto a Breen warship while the galaxy teeters on the edge of war. The tension is sky-high, all centered around ancient technology from the progenitors that could literally reshape the universe. Frakes brought his usual energy and precision behind the camera, delivering another strong, character-driven, action-packed episode. He's spoken openly about how much he enjoyed working with the Discovery cast and how proud he was to help bring such pivotal stories to life. But with Discovery now wrapped, Frakes finds himself at a bit of a crossroads when it comes to Star Trek. For now, he's not attached to any upcoming Trek projects. That puts Deathlands in the spotlight as his next big move, and it might just be the perfect chance for him to stretch his creative wings. With decades of sci-fi directing behind him and a sharp sense for what makes these stories connect, Frakes is well positioned to shape the gritty, unforgiving world of Deathlands. It's a far cry from Star Trek's hopeful vision, but for a director who's always been curious, it's an exciting new frontier.